There's nothing quite like the feeling of sitting down to watch some healthy horror schlock and getting pleasantly surprised by what you see. God knows there's a lot of garbage out there, so when you find something good, you can feel good about yourself. With that in mind, I'm Amy from What Culture, and here are 10 horror movies that had no right to be this good. 10. Till Death. A movie set in one location, with a first-time director and a simple plot that essentially acts as a star vehicle for Megan Fox. And you're telling me it's good? If you can claim you saw that coming, then you'd better join the X-Men because you're clearly clairvoyant. Till Death is a grueling movie that follows Emma, a woman who's handcuffed to her dead husband after a romantic trip gone wrong. A little bit Gerald's Game? Yeah, maybe. And as if that isn't bad enough, she now needs to survive against 2 assailants who are on their way to kill her. Megan Fox is an actor who's often held to a very high level of scrutiny, but whilst she has delivered some poor performances before, she's also given the world plenty of strong showings. This is certainly one of those. She plays the leading role perfectly and with just the right amount of desperation, determination and vulnerability. You really want to see her make it, which is why the movie works. The directing chair also had an impact on this film, as the guiding hand of S.K. Dale in his feature-length debut helped make the movie more stylish, punchy, and far more passionate than anyone could have expected. 9. In Fabric. You can turn almost anything into a scary villain in a horror movie. With that being said, there are a few things that filmmakers tend to avoid as they come across as corny or goofy, and one thing that usually fits this category is haunted clothing. Pieces of clothing that become evil aren't exactly the kind of thing that make an elevated horror movie, but lo and behold, A24's In Fabric came along and did just that. That's right, it's a dress. This is a movie about a cursed dress, and it's fantastic. In Fabric tells the tale of Sheila, a divorced, lonely woman who comes into the possession of an infamous piece of fabric. However, supernatural events follow suit, putting her family and many others in mortal danger. The film is very self-aware and does its best to acknowledge the ludicrousness of its concept. Whilst there's undoubtedly a tongue-in-cheek vibe to the film, it still chucks chills and thrills your way thanks to the tension, the acting, and the well-placed editing. Part of what makes the movie so fascinating is how surprisingly believable the dress is as a threat. You can genuinely sense something mystic and terrifying about the situation, and the killer finale will leave you speechless. 8. Apt Pupil. Stephen King novels have had somewhat mixed success when transferred into movie form. Some have been very, very bad, but some of them have actually been very good. By all accounts, this thriller is one of the good ones, as the concept is painfully sensitive, the source material is one of King's less remembered works, and yet it's a compelling, shocking, and altogether brutal watch. Apt Pupil tells the story of a young man who has an unhealthy fascination with everything macabre. His unnatural obsessions lead him to a fugitive Nazi war criminal, who just so happens to be living in his neighbourhood. Rather than revealing the man's identity, he blackmails him into retelling his atrocities. The film is unsettling and filled with tension. A lot of this comes from the acting, with Brad Renfro as Todd and Ian McKellen as Kurt. McKellen especially goes against his typecast to play one of the most shocking and unsettling roles ever, and this definitely makes for one of the more underappreciated ones of King's movie repertoire. 7. Dead End. Catching a decent scary movie set in the holiday period is about as rare as catching Santa Claus himself, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. Dead End is a great example of a seasonal horror movie done right, even if it is a little bit eccentric. The film follows the Harrington family as they venture off on a road trip to see the in-laws on Christmas Eve. After taking a shortcut, they end up on a terrifying haunted highway where they are picked off and killed one at a time. They fill their time by trying to solve the mystery and by bickering like any dysfunctional family would. It's a compelling tale that makes you cringe as much as it freaks you out, thanks to the awkward family tension. The Harringtons feel entirely authentic, turning the tragic circumstances into an utter nightmare. Still, don't fret, as the jolly spirit of Christmas is alive and well, with some zany and surprisingly dark comedy chucked in for good measure. 6. One Cut of the Dead. If you've been watching What Culture Horror for any length of time at all, then you've definitely caught us ranting and raving about this one several times before. On paper, this film has everything going against it, but in actuality, they really pulled it off. It's a mashup of found footage and typical filmmaking, a jarring hybrid of comedy and horror, and its non-chronological story could alienate some viewers. And even with its minuscule budget of $25,000, they still managed to make something incredible. The movie follows a filmmaking crew who's attacked by zombies whilst making their own zombie flick, but it turns out that that's just a film within a film, as the movie is really about the filmmakers making that movie with only one take allowed. It sounds confusing, and it kind of is, but it makes sense when you see it. Ultimately, there is just so much to love. The goofiness of the concept is effortlessly entertaining, and the characters are also a ton of fun. Just don't expect anything too horrific, because the movie is funnier than it is disgusting. It's a movie that should be schlocky and ridiculous, but it is in fact so good that it managed to make back over 1,000 times its own tiny budget. 5. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. Parody in horror is the kind of thing that either works wonderfully or falls completely flat. And Tucker and Dale vs. Evil is one of those rare parody movies that is just well known for being fantastic. The movie follows a duo of well-meaning hillbillies who are on a trip in the mountainside. They stay in a cabin in the woods, which as we all know is their first mistake, and unfortunately, things get awkward when they're mistaken for serial killers by a group of preppy college kids. Whilst the concept is genius, you'd think it might run dry quite quickly because it relies on one specific comedic idea. A comedy of errors and misunderstandings can easily get more frustrating than it is enjoyable. However, the film does an amazing job of constantly upping the stakes and making the scenario wilder and wilder, and so it never gets old and only goes from strength to strength. 4. School of the Holy Beast. Did I hear someone say nunsploitation? Anyone want some nunsploitation? God knows, horror loves nuns. And if you're looking for a film that's trashier than Bin Collection Day, then you're on the right track with this one. The movie follows a young woman named Yumi who joins a church convent to uncover the secrets of her mother's death. Whilst there though, she falls victim to the higher-ups, who actually turn out to be a bunch of lecherous, perverse and masochistic nuns and archbishops. The description likely makes the movie sound like torture porn, and whilst there is a lot of torture and enough nudity to make it feel close to porn, people generally say that it's shot beautifully and tells a surprisingly rich story that has some fantastic acting to back it up. Alongside that, there's some compelling exploration of the power dynamics and corruption of the church, so if that's your kind of thing, then there you go. 3. A Dark Song. This movie ticks all the boxes for what should be an average, borderline, mundane affair. One location? Check. Minimal cast? Check. Occult-based supernatural shenanigans? Check, check, check. Yet, despite all that, you won't be bored for a second in this thrilling, surprising, and downright genius British horror flick. The film follows the pairing of a desperate woman and an occultist as they hole up in a remote mansion and perform a dangerous ritual. The risk, however, will be worth the reward, as if they succeed, they can ask a guardian angel for whatever they want. Part of what makes the film so surprising is how deliberately subtle and subtextual it is. There isn't a focus on punchy editing or a barrage of jump scares. Instead, you're left to soak in the slow burn atmosphere and watch as the characters become victims to their own paranoia, isolation, and growing conflicts with each other. A Dark Song also juggles a lot of potent themes, with the concept of love, grief, loss, and faith permeating almost every moment. It takes what could have been a run-of-the-mill supernatural horror and turns it into something much more. 2. CLIMAX 2018. There are many classic horror setups that bring along spooky vibes whenever you think of them. A cabin in the woods, a gothic house on a dark hill, for example. But have you ever imagined a dance party turning into a horror show? Well, that's what this movie delves into. A24's CLIMAX shows a troupe of dancers gather in an empty school building to rehearse. But things get deadly when they're spiked with LSD, leading to mass hallucinations, revelations of dark secrets, violence, and a boatload of paranoia. While the concept in itself is already a tough sell, there's another reason why this movie shouldn't have worked, and that's the casting. The characters are all played by dancers, with only a handful of them having any acting experience. Seeing as the horror relies on the interactions between the ensemble, it's impressive that this inexperience didn't tank the film. And especially impressive that the performances are so strong. Besides that, the movie is also a visual treat, with stunning dance sequences, great use of colour, wonderful set design, and some unapologetically grotesque moments. Although it sounds like an overt art house flick, it's still an unflinching and brutal horror. 1. Get Out. "Oh, but this is a giant movie," I can already hear you saying. "Everyone knows this is amazing, you can't put this on the list." Well, I ask you to think back to the time before this movie was released, when everyone was looking at it, looking at Jordan Peele and going, "You're not a horror guy, what are you doing here?" This was the film that went on to change what horror could be and kick-started the horror directing career of Jordan Peele. No one could ever have predicted how great it was going to be at a time when none of us had seen what Jordan Peele could do outside of comedy. These days he's arguably one of the most respected current horror film directors, and even as I'm recording this, his newest movie, Nope, is absolutely killing it with reviewers. Peele was known for being a fantastic comedy guy, having great stints on Mad TV and being in the duo of Key and Peele. Whilst his comedy is genius, it's also goofy as hell and utterly bonkers at times. So when he suddenly released a horror movie, people were thinking it was going to be equally silly, goofy, you know. The last thing they expected was a meticulously detailed, densely packed and politically charged experience that would take horror to new heights. Get Out is a passion project that on paper has no right to be as damn good as it is, but it deserves all the praise it gets and more. And with that, we've reached the end of this list of 10 horror movies that had no right to be this good. If you've got some more that you would have added, then let us know in the comments down below, and remember to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. As always, I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.